A Kundalini. 20 years ago, most people had never heard of this term. You had never heard of this term. Today, it's a feared and sought after experience of meditation and yoga. In fact, it is the goal of all yoga and deep meditation. Do you hear me? It's the goal.
Yoga, a practice that has its roots in ancient India, has now become a global phenomenon. Millions of people around the world practice yoga for its health benefits and spiritual growth. But, with its origins in Indian culture, can yoga be separated from Indian traditions of gods, goddesses, and deities? Is it just a physical practice, or is there more to it? In this documentary, we explore the history of yoga and its journey from ancient India to the West. We also examine the negative aspects of Indian occult and mysticism involved in yoga practices and how it clashes with Christianity and Islam. Can yoga find harmony in the West, or will it collide with the cultural and religious beliefs of the West? Let's find out. Meditation. With respect to time and geographical area, the Indus Valley was the oldest and largest civilization on Earth. Evidence of the yogi seal is found all over its biggest settlements. The early form of Shiva is described as the Pashupati, which is supposed to be the horned deity. A lot of scholars believe that perhaps not this Pashupati or the Lord of Beasts, but probably was worshipped all over the region. Professor Singh suggests that the animals depicted in the seal are Maratkins, and the human figure is Pashupati, the Lord of the Beasts.
रुद्रस्य पुत्रा है, रुद्रस्य वीरा है, रुद्रस्य सूनव है, ये शब्द शुरू के मंत्रों में आ चुके हैं। ऐसी स्थिति में मरुदगण जो इसके देवता हैं, उनका रुद्र के साथ बहुत ही निकट संबंध स्थापित हो जाता है। रुद्र पिता हों और ये मरुदगण जो हैं उनके पुत्र हों। इन मरुदगणों को बाद में 7वें और 8वें मंत्र में
Let's understand Samkhya, the philosophy of yoga. The ancient text states that Samkhya and yoga are one. If Sankhya is the theory, yoga is its practice. Samkhya means accurate knowledge. Coincidentally, Samkhya also means numbers. To put it simply, it is a philosophy of the elements of nature in which the conscious entity is entangled. For the disentanglement of the self, the Samkhya philosophers used to meditate on the elements of nature. Samkhya considers two basic constituents in every living being: primal nature and conscious entity. Primal nature is known as Prakriti. Prakriti is the equilibrium of three basic elements: Sattva, Raja, Tama, and the conscious entity is known as Purusha, meaning limits or boundary, and Sha meaning restfulness. Each Purusha residing in the body boundary is a restful unit of consciousness. Purusha is not one but many. Prakriti is a single entity that extends throughout the universe and is very powerful. With the decline of the Harappa civilization, India moved from the prehistoric period to historical times when the readable literature of the Vedas came into being. There are 4 Vedas: Rig Veda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, and Atharvaveda. These texts were foundational to the Hindu religion, which is deeply rooted in the practice of yoga. However, the collision of yoga with Christianity and Islam has created a tension between Eastern and Western cultures. The idea of worshipping multiple gods and goddesses in yoga clashes with the monotheistic beliefs of Christianity and Islam. Some Christians and Muslims view yoga as a practice that goes against their religious beliefs and promotes idolatry. This has led to a divide among practitioners of yoga in the West who come from different religious backgrounds.
I don't know too much about the history of yoga, but as I understand it, there can be a philosophy, a spirituality associated with it, a particular view of the human person. And if you do yoga and kind of buy into all this philosophy and spirituality and looking at the human person, some of those things might be contrary to Christianity, so that's something we want to avoid. However, if you do yoga just because you find it good for exercise, for stretching, because it relaxes you, then I think it's a fine thing.
Is it permissible to do yoga in Islam? Recently, I read somewhere that it is an act of Hindu worshipping. Is it true? Can you please explain? As far as yoga is concerned, if you go to its history, it originated somewhere close to 5,000 years before. It originated in 3000 BC, in the pre-Vedic age, in the Indus Valley civilization. And yoga, it is associated with physical, mental, as well as spiritual activities. And it is also mentioned later on in the Hindu scriptures. It's mentioned in the Rig Veda, point number 5, chapter number 81, verse number 1, the word yoga is mentioned in relation to the sun god. It's mentioned in the Upanishads, it's mentioned in the Hindu scriptures, it's mentioned in the Buddhist scriptures, including the Jain scriptures. And you'll find it's mentioned in the 5th and 6th century BC. And it was made more famous to the Western world in the 20th century by Swami Vivekananda. The word yoga means union. It means union with God. It also means union with spirit. There are various different meanings depending upon the context it occurs in, whether in the Vedas, in the Upanishads, in Bhagavad Gita. But it is for sure associated with Hinduism and also with Buddhism and Jainism. As far as whether yoga is permissible or not, there is one group of scholars who says that it's a form of exercise, and as long as you're concerned only with the exercise and not related with the religious aspect, it is permitted. There's another group of scholars who says that as long as you do not do anything haram which is not against the Sharia, yoga is permitted. But the majority of the scholars, they agree that yoga in any form, it is not permissible, it is haram. And if you analyze that yoga is associated with Hinduism, and as I mentioned, the meaning of yoga is union with God. And there are various different forms and asanas of yoga. One of the most famous is the Surya Namaskar, which is the salutation to sun god. So, but naturally, this is nothing but a form of idol worship. It's a form of worshipping a false god. I'm sorry. So many of the asanas and the practices of yoga, it is related with Hinduism and it leads to shirk. So based on this aspect, according to me, I do agree with the last group of scholars and the majority of scholars who say that yoga in any form, if a Muslim does, it is prohibited.
While yoga is generally seen as a beneficial practice, it can be dangerous if done without proper knowledge and guidance.
But in the last 5-6 years, I've seen many, I think I've taken off at least 2 dozen reasonably popular yoga teachers in America to stop teaching, because I just pointed out what they were doing and how it is impacting their lives. See, doing improper yoga is not just that they're going to hurt their body, they will bring calamities into their life. Because what you need to understand is, Hatha Yoga, the simple physical form of yoga, is a way of aligning your system with the cosmic geometry.
So if you do it wrong, it's dangerous.
If you do it wrong, you not just may cause physical damage, you will bring situations in your life which are completely disastrous for you.
Moreover, the connection of yoga with Indian occult and mysticism can lead practitioners to engage in practices that are not aligned with their cultural and religious beliefs. It is essential to approach yoga with an open mind, but also with caution and respect for its traditions and practices. It is vital to seek guidance from experienced teachers and avoid practices that may not align with one's beliefs or comfort level.
There are masculine forms. There are lingas, which are mercury-based. There are elemental temples, which are mercury-based. But there are no the divine feminine with a mercury base. So this is a unique aspect. The solidification of mercury that's done here should easily last. That is, we have strengthened the third eye in a big way. So she's more intensity than compassion. I think you've been wallowing in love and compassion a little too much. The purpose of Devi is to become sensitive to life, not sensitive to society, not sensitive to…
The idea that all is one and distinctions between matter and energy and male and female and good and evil are merged into a single state of consciousness. Even yoga instructors and Hindu gurus, they warn about the effects of awakening this serpent. And among the results of the Kundalini awakening are feelings of a shattered identity, constant dreams of snakes, manic energy outbursts, terrifying dreams. But of course, they explain all this away, these negative consequences. They say it's just a disconnect between the physical body and the spiritual or subtle body. It'll resolve itself with time. Just do more yoga, more meditation. Guess what? You get more demons.
The burning question is, can yoga be separated from its inception?
So, first question, for you, what is the connection between Hindu mythology, because a lot of these gods and goddesses sit within the Hindu pantheon, and yoga? Where is that connection?
It's very difficult to say where it started, because we've got to remember these traditions are all oral traditions. They started out in a very strict guru-shishya parampara. So that means a guru or a teacher and a student. And parampara means a lineage or a methodology. And it was an oral tradition that you would get from your guru. You'd make that connection, and it would take decades for you to build that connection, going through lots of trials and tribulations. And this is happening simultaneously across the Southeast Asian pantheon, and it's happening across different areas. And a lot of it is, yes, the verses are there, but the interpretation of the verse is based on that particular guru and shishya's lived experience.
And you mentioned then about the verses. When you're talking about the verses, are you talking about texts such as the Bhagavad Gita, the Mahabharata? Are these the verses you're referring to?
The Bhagavad Gita, but also the slightly older texts, the Rig Veda, the Yajur Veda, because yoga in the asana form is what is quite accessible now, but in the devotional form and in the mantra chanting form is also available, and that's mentioned in the Rig Veda and the Yajur Veda.
Yes, so then when we considering ourselves as practitioners of yoga, the different ways that we can bring in the deities, the gods and goddesses, could be, yes, through the more modern approach of asana, but also through more traditional approaches of choosing mantras with different gods and goddesses that inspire us, different mudras, different devotional qualities to them.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's like a buffet. We get to pick and choose, and the rule of this buffet is to try everything. Before we go down one path, to try everything to get a well-rounded meal.
Yoga has become a global phenomenon that has transcended cultural and religious boundaries. Its benefits for physical and mental health have been widely recognized, and many people have found spiritual growth through its practice.
I started going to yoga classes, and I discovered that as I moved my body and focused on my breath, it opened up all this new space inside of me. And the Holy Spirit just said, now that I have your attention, let me tell you how much I love you. And that just changed everything for me.
However, the collision of yoga with Western cultures and religions has created tension and challenges that need to be addressed. It is essential to understand the history and philosophy of yoga to appreciate its traditions and practices fully. Practicing yoga with proper knowledge and guidance can help individuals reap its benefits without causing harm. As yoga continues to evolve, it is up to practitioners to find harmony and balance between tradition and modernity. The burning question is, can yoga be separated from its inception? I'll let you answer that. Go ahead and let us know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more content.